This is Make It Make Sense, and I'm Adam O'Neill. With me today are Dominic Pino, James Homan, and Jason Willick. Did you all get good grades in school? Did you earn them? Or did you feel that they were being inflated?
I got pretty good grades. And in 10 years ago, that was actually before this big grade inflation surge, at least at Harvard.
But why would it happen now instead of the centuries that these universities have existed? Why was it the last 10 years, do you think, that this started to happen?
Well, a few things. I think if you look at the data, grades have been inflating for a long time, for decades and decades, since the mid-20th century probably. But what's changed is they've just sort of reached the limit where they're just hitting up against the 4.0, so that distinctions at the top don't mean that much anymore. And what happened in the last 10 years, I think two things. One is COVID, which caused monetary inflation, as we know, or the political response to it at least did. And it also made professors want to give students good grades while they were from home, and everyone was feeling bad. And the other thing, though, I think, is in the mid-2010s, I don't think it's a coincidence that this sort of aligns with the takeoff of sort of wokeness on college campuses and sort of this sort of cultural move to the left on college campuses. And to the extent, there's the famous book, The Coddling of the American Mind, the sense of coddling young people. I think that definitely has been a part of this. So it's a long-running trend, accelerating in the last decade.
Right. And Dominic, I know we've talked about this before. You're sort of skeptical that we should even care about this problem.
Yeah, I don't think it's a huge problem in general. If you look, there's always been the saying "C's get degrees," right? And the idea behind that saying is that no matter what grades you got, as long as you get the degree at the end, you have the credential that employers are looking for.
Yeah. What do you call the person who graduated last from medical school?
Doctor. Right. This is another thing about this, right?
Although I wouldn't, like, if they're about to cut me open, I'd be like, I don't want to know where you graduated.
No, you don't want to know. But here's the thing: do you ever ask? Do you ever care? No, nobody cares.
Yeah, I mean it's a fair point. I will say sometimes interns will put their GPA. I don't really look at it. I mean, they only put it if it's good. So sure, but that's never been a decisive point for us. And we have interns year round.
Employers never ask for this, right? Because they know it doesn't really mean anything, and it never has. The idea behind the great inflation, panic is that this used to be this really meaningful measure, and it's not anymore. And I don't think that was ever true. It's always been the case that what employers are just looking for is the degree. And if the degree is from an elite school, it usually means more than if it was from a community college. And we could say that's unfair, and I think there's a decent amount of truth to that, but it is just the reality of it. And that was true when GPAs were much lower. Also, the problem with the GPA, too, is that it's an attempt to make a standardized measure out of something that's not standardized, right? Like, we all know that an A in a really hard high-level physics class means more than an A in a very low-level introductory class, and yet from a GPA point of view, it's a 4.0 either way. We also know between different degrees, different degrees have different fields of study, have different difficulty levels of coursework, but you can get a 4.0 in either of those, and it's on paper looks the same. And so I think there's good reason behind the fact that employers have never really cared about GPA, because it doesn't actually tell you that much.
Well, that's why you look at the transcript, right? I mean, you got to look at the whole transcript. I think where it really does matter is grad school. And I mean, one of the things is not only do we have the coddling of the American mind, but we have way over-educated, over-credentialed society right now. It's creating a huge problem. When you look at something like Mamdani, a lot of that is people who stuck around school, got master's degrees and professional degrees, took out a lot of loans, aren't getting the commensurate jobs because there's an oversupply. Now they're embittered and angry and resentful. And one of the challenges with graduate school admissions is with undergrad too, this grade inflation is happening at the same time that the SAT has been dumbed down. Yeah. And like a lot of colleges, this was the woke thing, a lot of colleges stopped even asking for SAT scores. And now they're starting to, because when you take away the SAT, when the SAT score is irrelevant, and when the transcript is irrelevant, then how do you judge people? You judge them based on extracurricular activities, which doesn't necessarily have any kind of bearing on their intellect. I mean, I actually I think this is a bad trend. I'm somewhat responsible for it. I teach a college class, and I'm a somewhat generous grader, not as generous as others, but you can, if you have a class of 20 people, not all 20 of them are the same, right? You could pretty easily rank your students from 1 to 20 over the course of 12 weeks. And it is hard because a lot of them do want to go to graduate school, and you don't want to set them back against a kid at a school where everyone is just handing out A's, and that the tests don't matter as much anymore. Yeah. And so it is this race to the bottom. And that's why I really like what Harvard has tried to do. They've backed down because of a student revolt, which is to basically say, look, we're going to go back to a curve, which is we're going to limit the number of A's, and you can still give a lot of A minuses, but an A should mean something. And so, it's 25% or whatever. It's not like there are no A's.
Jason, you're less skeptical of grades than Dominic is mattering or being an important measure, right?
Yeah, I mean, it totally depends. I agree. And, in the career I chose in journalism, my GPA ended up not mattering for much at all. If I had tried to go to graduate school, it probably would have mattered. Maybe if you had tried to go to consulting or some sort of more standardized big field where they're sorting through sort of hundreds of people for general, academic ability. I think the reality is people are going to compete, and you want to know where they stand. That's why a lot of teachers in letters of recommendation, the most valuable thing, I think, is when they say, this was my student was easily in the top 10%, or, this was the best student I had this year, or whatever. The grades no longer signal that. They might have before. If an A signals the top 20, 25% of the class, then the A signals something informative about how the student performed. What Harvard's going to do, it's 20% of the class plus 4 can get A's. So basically in a large class, 200 people, 100 people, you'd have 24 A's, almost a quarter. If it's a small class, everyone could get A's if it's like a 6-person seminar.
So they're just going to have 6-person classes only at Harvard from now on.
And it makes some sense because those tend to be the more advanced classes that you take, like when you're majoring in the subject or you're a higher level in the subject. And, it helps alleviate the pressure on people like James that really only have to give, 5.
My hands are tied.
Yeah. So I think the fact is people are going to compete. They're going to compete either on grades or on extracurriculars or something, because there's a limited number of slots, whether it's in law or consulting or medical or whatever. They're going to compete, and people need a way to sort that out. And grades are one way to do that. And I think restoring, this is not a radical adjustment. It's basically the share of A's that there were in 2010. Half. It's not a radical adjustment, and it'll make people easier to sort, and maybe it'll rebalance some of those other things. Like maybe people won't need to compete as hard on having 4 extracurricular activities because they can focus on their studies and know that will be enough to send a signal.
I just think, think back to what you learned in college. How much of it do you still remember today? How much of it did you remember the next semester after you got an A in the class? Not very much. And education research shows this, that people don't actually retain the information that they learn in the vast majority of cases. And so that grade, especially if it's, it's partly composed of stuff that you learned 3 or more years ago, it doesn't really mean anything by the time you're actually applying for a job. What are the valuable things that you get out of college? The valuable things that you get are the people that you meet, the habits that you develop in getting stuff done on time and being professional and learning how to interact with adults in an adult context, right? Like those are the things that actually matter and that people get out of college. And the grade ultimately it never reflected.
So for you, college is like a pass-fail. I got the degree or I didn't get the degree.
That's what it is. Law. Yeah. I mean, which maybe that's why they only produce like consultants and investors instead of actual lawyers,
but that is functionally what it is. And the way that you test this from a sort of economic point of view, and Brian Kaplan at George Mason has done research on this, like the way that you test this is, does someone who took all but the last semester of their class, or took all of their classes but didn't graduate for whatever reason, do they got all the same education of someone who did graduate, right? Do they have the same outcomes as people who actually graduated? And the answer is no. There's a huge gap There's a huge gap. People who go to college for 3 years and drop out, they don't get 3/4 of the benefit of someone who went for 4 years. The person who goes for 4 years and graduates gets a big benefit, and if anything less than that doesn't get the benefit. And so it's not actually that like we tell ourselves what's going on with college is this great human capital formation where we're educating people and they're learning things and they're making, but that's not really what's going on.
There's too much credentialism. I mean, college is supposed to be about learning, and I do think that that's been lost. And part of the blowback at Harvard from all these kids is like, oh, it's not about classes, it's about community. And it's like, no, I mean, right, whatever that is, like whatever the soft, it is about, and I think that has been lost at elite institutions, and probably more at elite institutions than non-elite institutions, where it's like the point is like rigorous academic study. Like you should be like grinding in the library, and a lot of people don't, because
Dominic, I agree with you that college, is overvalued in some ways. We probably put too much emphasis on going to college. I mean, another inflation is just the share of Americans who go to college, which is sort of part of the same logic. It's just that, everyone should be able to go to college, but do we really need all these jobs that probably don't, in fact, require a college degree to have that as a requirement for the job? So we could do with less credentialism all around, but I see that as consistent with enforcing the value of a high grade in college.
I don't think it makes a difference for that. What has caused a lot of that is subsidization from the federal government, right? And Big Beautiful Bill Act last year capped graduate student loans, which is going to be a great policy for a lot of this stuff. And I think it's going to put, for the graduate level, it's going to stop a lot of the cost inflation and a lot of the feeling that people have of, I have to go get a graduate degree even if they don't benefit from it. So I think, I think there's way too much of that, but I don't think that the grading has anything to do with it. One of the other points of evidence you could look at for this is, if you're just walking around in Cambridge, Massachusetts, or New Haven, Connecticut, or any of these places, a lot of times a big lecture hall class, you can go sit in on the class just a member of the public. No one's going to know.
Yeah, a lot of them are not even that. They're just available online.
Yeah, you
right?
go online. You could go learn. You can go learn exactly the same stuff that those kids are learning. And if you don't get a degree at the end of it, it doesn't mean anything.
No, exactly. In this new age of all the technological resources available, everyone has access to knowledge, and you can learn by yourself. College, in that sense, is kind of antiquated, that you're going to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars over 4 years for publicly available knowledge, because you're right, it's a credentialing thing that's more about measuring other things and giving other benefits other than just the knowledge. But again, to me, you want to be able to actually measure that. You want to be able to see how well people are performing in that situation, especially for our elite. I mean, some of these people are going to go to important jobs. We want to be able to sort, for people who are going to go into, military, finance, whatever it is that has an impact on the economy. We want more information. I mean, inflation erodes the value of information, and more information just seems better to me.
More accurate information, right? I think that's the critical thing.
Meaningful information.
If it's funny, because as an 18-year-old, as a dumb 18-year-old, I definitely did not take full advantage of the intellectual opportunities at college. I kind of was locked in and knew that this is what I wanted to be doing, journalism. And so I didn't enjoy my history classes as much as I could have, because I just wanted to be working. And now, as a dumb 34-year-old, I think like, wow, it would be so fun to go get a master's degree, just to have an organized,
to sit and read a book all day. Yeah,
and go to a lecture with someone who's been studying this for decades and knows all about it. Like, that'd be awesome. I would love to get. I don't have a grad degree. I never will. But that's like a little dream of mine, is to like get a master's degree. I think it would be a lot of fun.
As long as the federal government's not paying for it, I'm fine with it.
Okay, yeah, of course. Yeah. I think I can spring for it. But even it's tough, because you're right. I could just on the weekends watch course YouTube videos, and there was a time in my life actually where I was enjoying watching a lot of university lectures just for fun. But I think it's something about the imposed, the forced discipline of going to class and writing essays and doing it. I would very much enjoy it, but I think that ship has sailed.
I mean, the other thing also with AI, we're worried about declining literacy among people. Attention spans are shot. People don't need to read and write as much. You want to force at least our Harvard graduates to actually know how to read and write. And if they could get an A without
It
doing
would be good if people who graduated from Harvard could read and write. I don't think it's a controversial statement.
They're teaching remedial math at Harvard. I mean, this
Sure.
This
I mean, I will
is a
say,
real problem.